passionate about guiding women through midlife changes, helping them manage brain fog, hormonal shifts, and tools like peptide therapy. Her unique approach combines neuroscience, longevity science, and practical wellness strategies to help people feel sharper, stronger, and more vibrant at every stage of life. Dr. Avanova, thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's good to be here, and thank you for everyone joining us this evening. Well, to start, can you share a little about what inspired your passion to help individuals understand the connection between the gut, brain, and hormones? And just share with us a little about your background. I know you were an athlete, and just talk to us. Share a little information about yourself. Absolutely. Well, thank you. So it's slightly personal, and it's also slightly driven by the patients I've had the privilege of working with for many years. And as a physician, of course, we evolve over time. Science evolves over time. And so some of my evolution to what I do today has really transpired, first and foremost, because of some of my own issues I had to overcome, which were great learning tools. I learned a lot through my personal experiences, and I can apply a lot of that to patients as well. So as you mentioned, yes, I was an athlete. I played for the Canadian team. I played volleyball. I played for the University of Western Ontario, where I did my undergrad in biochemistry and genetics. And I was just playing there. I did a lot of figure competition. Like, let's just say movement was my world. Movement was my identity. So that was very passionate about helping people just move well, feel well, think well. And that really stemmed a big part of my identity. But what I did in practice as well, helping patients just move better, feel better, get out of pain, and just live their best life, basically. So I ended up having viral meningitis, and that kind of took me down, and I had to recover from that. And that became where my passion for functional medicine really stemmed from. This is over 20 years ago at this point. I, was an athlete. So I ate well. I, don't do drugs. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I was doing everything right, right? And then that situation came around, and I just couldn't understand, how did I get this? So once I started recovering, feeling a little bit better, it did take 2.5 years to be able to get back to functioning. I had a lot of brain fog, fatigue issues, just a lot of struggle to be able to recover back to full vitality. And it was a humbling experience. It was a wonderful learning experience, and I really understood the effect of neuroplasticity. So when you're not doing what you need to be doing on a regular basis, when cells, various cells, you pick the cells, gut cells, liver cells, brain cells, when they're not able to do what they need to be doing on a regular basis, obviously they're going to become deconditioned, right? And I had to regain some of that skill set. So I dove deep into functional medicine to learn what all happened. And that's sort of how I became, in the world of, inflammation, neuroautoimmunity, particularly autoimmune conditions. So just beyond, optimization, like let's just eat well and take, all the right supplements for nutritional deficiencies and things. Although that's critical important, because if we don't have the foundations, we can't, our iron levels, our B12 levels, like some of the fundamentals, we can't put neurotransmitters together, right? So of course that's critical, but I kind of took it a little bit further than that, because I wanted more answers. When I get passionate about something, I kind of just dig all, I jump full in, and I want to know everything about everything. So little by little, that ended up leading me to the world of functional neurology. Functional medicine was wonderful, and I really enjoyed that space. I continue to enjoy that space to help people on that level. And I combine it now with functional neurology, partly because I had a couple of concussions. So I had the privilege of experiencing some traumatic brain injuries, viral meningitis being one, and then the acquired one as well. So I got to dive deep into that world of what happens when neurons are not functioning properly. There was no damage, so no structural damage, no bleed on the brain, no cancer, no cysts, so nothing structural, but functionally, I wasn't doing well. And it kind of sent me right back to how I was when I had viral meningitis. So everything kind of came full circle. I, again, dove in deep, learned a lot. I started to understand how to heal the brain and how to basically connect brain to body, right? So we really can't separate these organ systems. So even though there are things I needed to fix metabolically, there are things that I needed to improve in my brain functionality in terms of neural pathways and connections in that sense, so that the brain can function better. I really ended up pairing the two aspects together. And so I practice this way now in my practice, where I work with people from all over, actually, all over the world. They'll fly in to come see me. I have the privilege of that opportunity to work with people closely, very intimately, and really teasing back what's really going on. A lot of my clients will come to me for brain fog. So, the lack of mental clarity, the word findings. Sometimes there is other symptoms going on. Everyone's unique, of course, right? And many times there are also metabolic things going on. So I've got to peel back the layers and look at, what are we dealing with? What's, I've got my little check boxes, what's good, what is it, and how do we improve that? And many times I do need to address that metabolic side of things to improve brain health. So that's kind of how I've gotten to be where I am today. Grateful for the journey, and excited about being in the peptide space, in the sense that has revolutionize a little bit of the ability for me as a physician to provide better tools and education and knowledge to patients beyond what I was even doing a year ago. The peptide space is incredibly exciting. It's rapidly moving forward. It's lots happening there. And what's interesting is, for the first time, I feel normally as a physician, we'll turn to research to get the answers, right? Because the researchers are doing the studies and they discover the things, and then we apply them in practice to people. And I find in this time, people are applying, getting therapeutic peptides, and we're finding the benefits of those. And now research is catching up to the findings we're already seeing in the field, in the clinic. So I'm very excited to be able to offer more to my patients, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today and be able to share more knowledge, because really, for me, the most important thing as a physician, and just as a friend and a colleague, is empowering people with knowledge. So more knowledge you can have for yourself, you can make better decisions for yourself. And the more you can understand what's happening, not to get too deep in the chemistry of things and the neuroscience of things, doesn't have to be complex by any means, but definitely having the knowledge is important. So I'm so grateful to be here today. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you. There's so much commonality between us. I mean, the shared mission of educating, interacting with, that's part of my mission. Interact with our community, learn something, find nothing. We've done our job, and I love that we're collaborating on that effort. And you're also a biochemist, so I love that we have similar backgrounds. But what an incredible story and journey of personal experience that you've had to get here. And I just love, I'm excited about our conversation. But there's something that you said before the call, and you're like, we can't heal the brain if we don't first address the gut and heal the gut. So let's take it back to the first principles, and let's talk about the gut-brain connection, even before hormones. Like, talk to us, what does the gut do? Talk to us about the microbiome, the complexity of it. A lot of people call the gut the second brain. I'm almost like, well, we don't know this yet. There's so much that we're discovering and learning, and it could even be the first brain. We don't even know that yet. So talk to us, bring it down to the basics, and then, maybe explain to people who may not be familiar with neurotransmitters and neurons, what those are. So if you could just peel the onion layer by layer, that would be great. Absolutely. Okay. Well, I do love this topic. So stop me if I'm going too far or too much. But absolutely. I'm a very holistic practitioner. So part of my, philosophy or approach to health, my own health and health of others, is it starts in the gut. So a little bit of an Eastern approach in that regard. But basically, the gut is where we're going to be nourishing ourselves, right? So the only way we're going to be able to provide nutrients to all organ systems and all tissues in our body, we have to nourish them, right? So it's going to occur at the gut. So if we're not able to appropriately draw in nutrients because of various burdens that may be occurring in the gut, so, a dysbiosis where we're having, issues with maybe the microbiome in the sense of, how what's the quality of that microbiome? Maybe there's something like a leaky gut where the integrity of the gut cells have become a little bit permeable, right? There is a degree of permeability, but become a little more permeable than they should, right? And things are getting through that they're not supposed to, right? So we've got this dysregulation there, and we need to peel back, why are these kind of things happening? But when those kind of things happen, kind of everything doesn't work as well. So this is why I feel the gut is the place to begin and to consider and to start, and important to heal the gut. We know, for example, when someone gets a concussion, for example, okay, so a mild traumatic brain injury, okay, you don't have to lose consciousness to have a concussion. We know within 24 hours there's a leaky gut. Most people don't realize that there'll be a leaky gut occurring just from that incident. And sure enough, usually about a year later, they're going to be developing some kind of inflammatory condition, maybe even possibly the beginnings or a named autoimmune condition. So we can see this, and I've seen this many times in my practice. So the idea of healing the gut, right? Healing, let's say, this leaky gut. And there's many reasons why we have leaky gut. But when we don't have the proper integrity of the gut, we're going to be setting ourselves up for dis-ease, right? And a variety of diseases. Yes. So we want to make sure we maintain that integrity. And certainly what we eat matters. We know, for example, gluten, will disrupt a protein in the gut that holds those gut cells together, kind of the glue that holds the cells together, called zoulin. We have ways of testing this. I regularly will do some gut panels for my patients, and we can see if there's a leaky gut happening, right? So we can use obviously symptoms like bloating, indigestion, although that could also be a little bit at the stomach level, but it could be also in the intestines. SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, can occur when we don't have the proper flora. We can have a variety of different, disequilibrium in the flora as well. So we can go by symptoms, we can go by objective findings, but it is so important that we do heal the gut. Definitely considering what we're eating, for example. One of the most important things I always try to share is before we try to optimize or heal, okay? We always want to do that at the highest level, but let's remove the burdens to the system. Like you can't out-supplement a poor diet. You can't out-peptide, a poor diet. These things will help, definitely, but it's kind of like, let's say, diabetic, eating their cake and taking the insulin at the same time, right? Like that's not what we're trying to do. We are trying to support the system. So we need to be thinking about the tools that we utilize to heal these areas, but also a lot of it is our lifestyle and our habits and our actions, right? So that goes a long way. So we've got a lot of power and abilities, each of us, to be able to take charge and start making some habit changes, while we at the same time are supporting gut healing for a variety of things. So gut health is important. We want to make sure that we have good quality flora. We want to make sure we have good digestion. We want to make sure that we don't have a leaky gut. When we have a leaky gut, we tend to have other leaky barriers. For example, the brain barrier, despite having the concussion I mentioned earlier. You can independently have a leaky gut for some of the reasons we discussed already and create a leaky brain. And so now you're going to be causing things to come into the system through the leaky gut, and now be able to cross, the blood-brain barrier, which normally it wouldn't have crossed. And now we're going to get neuroinflammation. So not only are we having systemic inflammation, we're going to start having neuroinflammation. So we're just really needing to kind of control this situation, right? So we've got to really bring it back home and start basically back at the gut. We can certainly heal the blood-brain barrier, but we also can heal the gut barrier as well. Also, when we have these leaky barriers, we all have a leaky sinus barrier, a leaky inner ear barrier. So it's not uncommon for sometimes people to have issues with balance, to have a variety of other sinus-related things too. So it's not just thinking, okay, gut and brain, certainly those are important components, but these barriers are key. So being able to heal that and create that balance in the flora is really, really important. We have a variety of neurons called the enteric nervous system. And that system, it heavily innervates our organs. And, we all know I think nowadays, vagus nerve has become a pretty popular term. I think everyone is really familiar with the vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10, vagus for wanderer. And, it's a nerve that's up in the brain and will come down into the body. It's part of our nervous system as well as our enteric nervous system. And these neurons are sensing a lot of things. They're also releasing neurotransmitters and doing a variety of functions. In fact, one of the most important functions of the vagus nerve is actually take information from the gut and the other organ systems and actually bring it back up into the brain. 60% of it is bringing information up versus bringing information from top down. Usually we think of neurons that fire from the brain out to the body as just coming from top down, but the vagus actually's job is to get information about the surround and what's occurring and to bring that back up. So again, why it's important to really get sound in the digestive area. Okay, so what I understand you saying is that there's these little grooves and root gates, is that what they're called? And then they expand, right? And for a number of reasons, whether it's inflammation, whether it's gluten in our diet, what other reasons could there be for these? There could be viruses or bacteria. Infections can do that. Medications can do that sometimes. Even though they're well-meaning medications, they can have effects at the gut. Mold, very environmental triggers, chemical toxicity, a variety of things. Okay, so once that happens, there's no longer that protection for your body. That's what I understand. And then from there, a slew of other diseases and problems happened. That affects the brain, that affects all sorts of systems within the body. That's what I understand, if I could summarize. And then the vagus nerve is also this communication between the brain and the gut. So we got that part down. Now, I understand that a lot of chemicals are also produced in the gut, including 90% of your serotonin and a lot of your neurotransmitters. And can you talk to us about the hormones and the gut-brain connection between hormones and neurotransmitters and how that all works together and what that ultimately means? Okay, and specifically, which hormones are you interested in? So I'm clear, so I can stay on target with what. Let's start with ghrelin, leptin. These are hunger signals, but then, we could take it one step further. We could talk about estrogen and all of our sex hormones as well, if you'd like. Sure. So again, everyone's a little bit different, but yes, we do have a lot of neurotransmitters, particularly serotonin, in the gut. That's why sometimes people, you mentioned it being the second brain, right? Yeah, maybe it is the first brain, in honesty, but, sometimes people get that gut feeling or if some people are stressing, for example, another trigger, for some people who really produce a lot of neurotransmitters in their gut, their gut gets torn up, so to speak, because of that. So again, we can see these relationships between mood and what's happening in our biochemistry as well. So yes, we do have a variety of hormones, as you mentioned, that will help with, being satiated as well as picking up on carbohydrate content, fat content as well, to be able to feed back to help our digestive organs to process foods and things. And that also goes back up into the brain as well, right? So sometimes, like for example, people have food noise, and they can't kind of calm down that food noise. They're having these thoughts of food or desires to eat, even though they feel maybe full, and technically they've had enough macronutrients to satisfy the energetic needs. But they're again feedback loops that are not connecting in the right ways. So again, we've got to find ways to balance the system out and be able to, maybe some areas that are hyper-regulated, right, or getting a little too much signaling. We're going to need to be able to, balance things as well, so that those right signals from the gut are coming up into the brain appropriately. That's again where we're talking a little bit of the enteric nervous system and the vagus nervous system as that communicator. I'm not sure if you froze, honey. Maybe. I think you did. Maybe. For sure. How do you feel about fasting for gut health? She wants to try to do it again, maybe once or twice a year, but she's looking for any advice. Yeah, so thanks, Stacey. Thank you, Brenda. Well, I don't know Stacey. I don't know her whole history. I don't know anything that's really going on. So can't really give Stacey any specific advice, but we can just generally talk about fasting, which can be valuable to many people in terms of just decreasing the burden into the system so that the gut does have a chance to heal, especially if there is something that was consumed or being consumed that, again, was causing some dysregulation into the gut. The gut's really healing, yeah? The gut turns over every 6 days. So it's good that we can heal it very quickly by reducing the burden. The issue sometimes with fasting, and I'm just going to mention this in the context because we are talking about peptides, is that for some people who cannot manage their blood sugar, they have, dysregulation in their glucose metabolism. And fasting, basically, not having much food or opening up the windows of eating to longer periods of time could cause a real big crash, becoming a hypoglycemic. And especially if there's an underlying insulin resistance that is occurring, this can really actually cause a lot of metabolic stress and cause a lot of cortisol spikes. So again, everyone's unique and different, but we do want to caution a little bit using the idea of fasting. If one is familiar with fasting, if one feels their, ability to utilize fuels efficiently is working well for them, then fasting could be a wonderful option because we know when we can do that successfully without the sugar crashes, without the headaches and all the potential chaos that could happen, which wouldn't be beneficial. But assuming that that's all good, fasting can be very valuable. We know that mitochondria, which is the energy factories of our cells, can undergo a process of mitophagy, which is just the old mitochondria will die, the new ones will be produced, and this is good because these are our energy powerhouses, right? So we can a lot of times start to have more energy and feel better, and of course it's a wonderful tool, again, if sugar regulation is in check. This is a wonderful tool in terms of just cellular health and vitality. So not only from a helping of the gut, decreasing any of the bloat, many times also if there's a dysregulation in the flora, in our good flora, the commensal bacteria, the good bacteria that needs to be there, sometimes they're not balanced in the levels they need to be. So even though the good bacteria is there, there isn't bad pathogenic bacteria, obviously, that you would need some antibiotics for or something. But if they're not able to process some of the food that's being ingested, they could cause gas, bloat, and cramping and various things like that. So as one starts to reintegrate food after perhaps a fast like Stacey's done for 5 days, slow integration and checking to see, maybe what did I just consume? Did I all of a sudden have a symptom? And that will help us figure out what might be going on and other steps to perhaps take. Something's out of balance. Yeah, in the gut, yeah, and specifically in the gut. So obviously, immediately upon consuming anything, so within 30 minutes to 2 hours, for example, if we have any issues in the intestines or even in the stomach, we're going to start to have some bloating. We might have, just that indigestion. We're going to start to maybe even get gas, and we're just going to get that big blow. We can easily, when we have insulin resistance and we're not managing our sugars really well, we can get sleepy, tired, drowsy while we're eating or slightly after. So generally my question is, you get sleepy, tired, drowsy 15 to 20, maybe 30 minutes after a meal. People call it the food coma. We know now that actually it's taking so much effort to process the food that you just ate that the system's hates because it doesn't have enough energy coming back into the cells. But in terms of dysbiosis, definitely gas, flatulence, bloating, feeling maybe just kind of fatigue, not necessarily from a sugar handling perspective, but just, sometimes people could bloat so much that it actually pushes up onto the lungs and they have difficulty breathing because there's just so much pressure from the abdominal cavity coming up into the lungs that the diaphragm can't drop to take a full breath. So there could be even some shortness of breath in that regards. To keep stress, disrupt our microbiome. Yes, well, we talked a little bit about diet in terms of gluten, one of our big culprits. Certainly there could be other foods that could dysregulate. Definitely. Sleep, of course, we know is so important and can be challenging, especially as we start getting hormone fluctuations later in life, and even into the 30s. It doesn't have to be midlife, right? Can even start early as progesterone starts to come down a little bit in overall level. But yeah, sleep, of course, is where we're going to replenish, right? So in our nervous system, we have the sympathetic side of the nervous system. That's the fight, flight, freeze, and then the parasympathetic, rest, digest, replenish, and heal. So when we get into good quality sleep, hopefully good quality sleep, we have many windows through our sleep cycle throughout the evening for replenish and heal. And this is time also, for example, where like growth hormone will be naturally secreted into our system at various times, right? It pulses into our system. Some throughout the day, but particularly the nighttime, because you're not doing anything else, right? All the energy can be conserved to doing what the body needs to do to regenerate. So this is an important time. Sleep hygiene, not being on the phones late at night, bright lights, of course, affects the retina, affects the hypothalamus, which now can affect our hormone system, affects our immune system, and yada, 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 right? So getting into a good sleep-rich regimen is important. As well, many people sometimes, will snore, maybe have some sleep apnea. They're not getting the quality of oxygenation that they need at nighttime. So that cannot be not the ideal healing moment, right? Because if you can't get oxygen into the cells, how do you expect the cells to do anything? So of course, these are kind of things we want to consider with sleep and movement, right? So movement is so important in terms of lifestyle. Some people call it exercise. It certainly can be exercise. It could be a sport. It could be various activities. It could just be movement. And we know that we, encourage circulation, encourage muscle growth, all the stimulation. But BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, so important and triggered when we exercise. So this is another healing factor, which is important, right? So many benefits to exercise, actually. As we age. Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball for that. So it's a really wide window because it's varied for everyone. But definitely, we on average here in America, women will enter menopause at the age of 52, which means they've at that point didn't have a cycle for a year. So really, dysregulation started at 51. No, it didn't. We know that could easily be a 10 plus window on things where we have these hormonal shifts. So I would say easily into the early 30s, mid 30s, there will be some, and then there'll be more in the 40s, obviously, and late 40s, right? So we want to start thinking about these things sooner than later, and this idea of perimenopause, right? It's kind of this like entry into that midlife stage. We want to start considering the fluctuations as a natural transition. I had the opportunity of speaking a couple years ago, the neuroscience of menopause, and talking about the effects that just changes in women's hormones, mostly estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, have not only on the brain, obviously, that's a big component, but on the body as well, but specifically the brain. So these are things we need to start considering, and unfortunately, still a little bit in medicine, although it's improving. Not many doctors are really cueing in to the subtle symptoms that start to occur for men and women as there are hormonal fluctuations that start to occur, as we age. And so in the beginning, it's subtle, and it could just be written off as a bunch of different things until it becomes more understood or more clear. But as inflammation burdens and diminishing the inflammation that could be occurring there, which then affects the system, which we mentioned earlier. Estrogen is anti-inflammatory. So as some of the estrogen starts to naturally decline, it waxes and wanes a little bit during the perimenopausal years, and then it just takes a nosedive at menopause. And the system really has to rally. It's difficult for the cells who are accustomed to being bathed in these hormones on a really regular basis. So we're going to start seeing the changes on so many systems. So there'll be all these, like weird signs of menopause or perimenopause, right? All these weird symptoms, gut-related symptoms. You have tinnitus, you have frozen shoulder, hot flashes, as we know about. A variety of things. Definitely changes to the flora of the gut. Definitely. If we ate well. Things, and that's the challenge. It's just we don't have a meter that we can read what's happening to our systems every moment of every day, and then we're just having to be on the receiving end of the changes to our bodies, right? Later on environmental changes, later on stress, because it's called living on planet Earth. There'll be a variety of different moments of stress and things like that. It waxes and wanes. So all these things do really affect the gut. So definitely needing to concentrate on what we can do to support the gut, right? Right. Yeah. The last time we were together, we discussed, so you have the gut microbiome and it competes with resources with candida, right? They compete for resources. And we talked about how sugar feeds the candida overgrowth, and then the candida, which is yeast, the candida overgrowth has all these neurotoxins that affect the body, the neurotransmitters in the body. And so it's this world that we're still uncovering and learning about. And it's important to realize that we adapted to live alongside the gut microbiome. It didn't work. And it's symbiotic, right? There's this beautiful relationship that we have. So we need to keep everything in balance. So we talk a lot about the problems that it can cause, but what can we do about it? You mentioned exercise is something that we can do, sleeping well, but what else can we do to help?
Sure. I mean, definitely a healthy lifestyle, which has all those components to it. But, what I have shifted in my practice, specifically in this last year, is turning to peptides, specifically a peptide called BPC 157. So body protective compound, BPC, body protective compound 157. And this is the reason for that is because, again, if we cannot get the gut to be balanced, of course, if there's like a candida overgrowth, we've got to deal with it, right? So we need to look at all these things, but we need to help the system heal. And the BPC does a wonderful job of healing the gut. Many times people have an IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, colitis. There's just a lot of different inflammatory situations happening in the gut, besides just a general dysbiosis. So again, creating the terrain for the good quality flora to colonize and do the jobs it needs, because it is a symbiotic relationship. We need the gut flora. We need our flora. We need good quality flora. And when we don't have that, that's not good to us. So we've got to treat it well, and we've got to create the right environment to grow a beautiful garden, so to speak. So BPC 157 has really changed how I approach practice. I still implement some other gut healing strategies as well alongside, because I always want my patients to be empowered to do things they can do as well every single day. But that has really been useful. And I can say in the last year, reflecting back of 24 years of practice to this 1 year of practice adding BPC, I can see how I can help patients make those changes a little bit quicker by recommending BPC 157.
Can you talk a little bit more about how BPC works? Maybe not necessarily the mechanism of action, but it was derived from the gastric juices of the intestine and gut.
Interesting, right? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So it has a lot of healing properties, but what can it do? What are the benefits of healing?
Yes, absolutely. Organ therapy, sometimes I know it's a little controversial on some people, but there are some supplement companies that will include, stomach and small intestine. Funny enough, those always seem to do well. So here we have BPC that can be isolated directly, even more concentrate into the gut. So what can it do? Obviously, it's going to heal, inflammation, right? It's going to allow with the leaky gut that we talked about before, where the cells can come together and be, much more of a, kind of like fences without gaps between them, right? So just nice and close. So we don't have things getting through into our system that shouldn't be, that can start setting up potentially an autoimmune condition or other kind of things like that. So the inflammation part is a really big part. It's obviously very regenerative to the epithelial cells themselves, the cells that are in the intestines, and calming down inflammatory pathways, right? So we say, it decreases inflammation. Well, it's actually, peptides are just a string of amino acids in a particular sequence, and they have a particular job. So BPC has its job, yes. And they're signaling molecules. So they're going to turn off switches or turn on switches that are going to cause anti-inflammatory effects. And then once we remove the burden, the system can flourish, right? So it's just kind of like a garden, right? Once you give it what it needs, it thrives. So definitely with any autoimmune conditions, even in the gut, for example, or systemically, it really works well.
Can you touch on GLP-1s and their effect on the gut system?
Yeah, in what regard? In terms of
helps and how it regulates the gut microbiome. And there's a lot of research that's coming out of this. But do you have any information on that you'd like to share on GLP-1?
Yes, this is a very exciting field. Beyond the benefits of GLP-1 from a weight management perspective and with obesity, but now there's so much more research coming out, as you mentioned, that speaks to the value of utilizing, and in fact, many various boards and things have now started to implement that as even first line of action towards that. So we're seeing a lot of rapid changes in the uses of a GLP-1, not from a weight loss perspective or maybe alongside that, but also from a microdosing perspective, taking smaller amounts for, again, all the therapeutic benefits. So definitely, from the brain perspective, which is where I always also consider, besides the gut, I go to the brain, but definitely in the brain, we're seeing the benefits from the ability, not even people who have dementia or potentially any type of mild cognitive impairment or a labeled condition like dementia and Alzheimer's, we're seeing the ability to improve brain fog, mental clarity, memory, right, word recall, all these frontal lobe function, the executive centers, motivation, organization, decision making, these frontal lobe is improving. And I think, again, because we're helping glucose utilization. The GLP-1s have this ability to improve, insulin resistance and to help with sugar, regulation, metabolism. So I do believe they're bringing more adequate fuel to the brain, or helping the brain receive that energy, okay, to do that. So we're seeing things like that. We're seeing things also in terms of addiction. So that's very fascinating as well. There's more research being done there, but certainly we're seeing that as people are maybe not having the food noise, they're also maybe not having some addictions as well, shopping addictions, or various things, smoking, drinking, whatever the addiction may be. We're also seeing benefits for the GLP-1, not only in the gut, obviously, in terms of just the cessation of it, but heart, kidney. We're seeing the research telling us that we have these GLP-1 receptors throughout the whole body. So it's really becoming incredible, actually, of the potential use that they have. So this world of microdosing has become, very exciting, and people are starting to become very interested in that. Again, not enough to probably really lose weight, although maybe there may be a little bit. There's been some recent, I believe it was in 2024, if I can think of this article correctly, talked about GLP-1s decreasing the top 10 obesity-related cancers. So you're not saying that cures cancer. No, we're not saying that. But again, supporting metabolic health and being able to, fat is very inflammatory. Adipose tissue itself is very inflammatory. And then we have visceral fat, right, which is its own separate entity, but it can be inflammatory too. So just improving and diminishing inflammation, even around the heart, decreasing inflammation, decreasing visceral fat around the heart improves heart health. We're also seeing again, I believe it just came out last week, this paper that talked about how, because I do functional medicine, I run a lot of labs, and so I have the privilege of seeing people before their peptides and what their markers were, and now if they've been taking some peptides for a time, and I can see the markers. We can enter this research paper, I believe it came out 1 week ago, spoke to the improvements of CRP, high sensitivity, HSCRP, high sensitivity, which is a very important marker for cardiovascular disease. So that number is important, and we can see that improves on a GLP-1. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, and at the conference that I'm at currently, it's mainly geared towards longevity, but there's always a lot of talk about Akkermansia, the very good bacteria that on, and GLPs increase Akkermansia, reduce the pro-inflammatory bacteria. So this is a whole field that we're still uncovering, and all the benefits of GLP-1s when it comes to gut health for sure. Let's take some questions from our audience. And what being diagnosed with diverticular make you not eligible for GLP-1s? Maybe you can touch on that.
That I'm not sure, since I don't prescribe those. I would be saying those to a physician that would make that decision. I do know of patients that have that diagnosis and they're on a GLP-1 as well, but that could be unique to their condition. So I think that would require checking in with a physician, with a prescribing physician.
Here's one I'd like for you to clarify. There's a lot of talks about prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics. Can you just quickly touch on that?
Well, absolutely. It goes back to us creating that beautiful garden for the good quality bacteria, our flora, right? So our commensal bacteria, right? And you've talked about a few of our key players that we like to have, colonizing our gut. So our flora, to make a nice home for the flora, to say, hey guys, like, we'd love you to stay, and please, because you make us work better, we need to feed that flora. So this is where a prebiotic comes into place, yeah? And so we want to be looking at things like fiber. Yeah, fiber, very, very important. We have to feed this flora. We can't just assume it just sort of lives down there and like, good luck to it, right? We need to provide a short chain fatty acids. Very, very important. There's a few important ones, but butyrate, for example, is a key one. There's a few others, but overall, these are some general ideas that we want to support, because the flora will take those nourishments for themselves. They will be happy, and then they will produce things that we can benefit from. Okay, that helps support our gut lining. So like medium chain fatty acids, that's going to support our intestinal cells, right? So that's the symbiotic relationship you were speaking about there, right? So a prebiotic, we're really looking at fiber. So again, 25 grams of fiber a day keeps the doctor away. Apples, for example, the skin of an apple has fiber in it, has some pectin in it, but that's not going to be 25 grams off of an apple, right? We're going to need to supplement, most likely, in our typical diet. You can get it all through nutrition, of course. You certainly can make a really strong effort for that. But most people find that challenging. They're not eating enough fruits and vegetables to make that happen. And there may be some carbohydrate considerations we need to consider, the amount we're consuming as well. So it's usually supplementing that as well. And if I...
Anyway, Brain injury 5 years ago and doing very well now, wanting to know what products Ellie has that would benefit me the most for memory and clarity.
Okay, that's a good one. Absolutely. So a couple of products that I can think of hand, in no particular order. These are just kind of what's popping to my mind. So I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here, okay? NAD, right? So anything we can do that can support energy, right? Many times, brain function, when it comes to brain function, it's an energetic issue. So if we can provide more energy to the system, and NAD is obviously a cofactor. We, as we age, we naturally produce less NAD over time. It is something that needs to start to be supplemented, taken in externally in various ways. There's a nasal version, for example, right? There's an injectable version. So there's like a few ways that we can start to support that cellular energetic process. Okay, so that's as we age, regardless. When we've had a traumatic brain injury, we may need to support brain health a little bit more. I certainly do because of my traumatic brain injury, so NAD would be great. I am seeing a little uptick, and this is just my own observation and practice. I haven't dug deep enough in research to see if this is supporting the research, but I know the nasal version seems to help with ADHD just a little bit better than the injection for some reason. And I think it's because of the delivery right here in the up in the nose. I do a lot of red light therapy in the nasal area as well, nasal applicators, because it goes right up into the frontal lobe, like right there. So there may be some relationship there. I just am observing that through patients. So I kind of lean a little bit into the nasal, but I think the injection is obviously systemically better. Synapsin is another product that Ellie has. And this product helps bring more blood flow and circulation to the brain. So again, back to energetics. What are the three neuro necessities that all neurons need? They need oxygen, fuel, and good stimulation. What's in blood flow? Oxygen, and of course, a fuel source, glucose. Yeah. So that would be useful there because of part of what's in that formula. For some people, that might be a little too much. Again, it depends on people, so you have to try. And then of course, GLP-1. That's of course a big one. That's on my probably tops if I could. Last would be glutathione. So glutathione is a wonderful antioxidant. We need glutathione in the system. It's again one of those things that we need to support as we age. We need to bring more of that in. Definitely doing it via the injection would be better than consuming precursor supplements that we hope that our own body will make the glutathione. That can happen. But if you want a little bit more reassurance that you're really letting glutathione in, and we can measure this on blood so we can know if this is working or not. But definitely the glutathione, we need that antioxidant support, especially if there's a history of a traumatic brain injury or anything really where the system's under dealing with stress and diseases, which we all tend to have something, right? we all have something we're working on. So yeah, those would be just the top ones that popped to my mind.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. There's a question that came in. My son developed trigeminal neuropathy.
Okay.
COVID infection 3 years ago. Any peptides that you recommend for this condition?
Well, trigeminal neuropathy.
The post-COVID symptoms, right?
Yeah, I was going to say I'm going to address more of a long COVID as opposed to the trigeminal neuralgia because that's kind of a little bit specific in that, but long COVID for sure. Long COVID it's a virus, obviously, as it can affect the system in many different ways, and people have been struggling with long COVID. And so there are things that we can do to support the immune system. Basically, sometimes we're just going to harbor certain viruses in various tissues. Sometimes those viruses can be harbored in neurons, peripherally, in our central nervous system, in various organs. And we have to really have a strong immune system for that, right? So again, it goes right back to BPC, some of our initial conversation of supporting the gut quality, nourishment coming in, decreasing the inflammation, decrease the burden off of the system. So that would be a big part of that.
Besides peptides, are there foods that you recommend we can eat to support our gut microbiome? Are there recommendations? Are there any specific kimchi? There's a lot of benefits in fermented foods, but are there any?
Yeah. Fermented food, certainly if people don't have a histamine, related issue, right? So that could be a potential for many people, but some people have some history in intolerance. But, just eating a sound diet, it really doesn't have to get super fancy. Just really getting your macros in is really the best. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best. And honestly, it's when I see my practice, it's reduce the burdens. People burden the system and they're not providing it with just the basics. So for sure, are there things that you can eat? Vitamin C is great for so many things, right? So eat some oranges, have some lemons, right? We talked about apples with the skin and the pectin, right? Protein, my goodness, we haven't even discussed how important protein is, but protein's super important. Quality sources of protein. And then of course our antioxidants in our fruits and our vegetables and all our nutrients, right? So our vitamins and our minerals, vitamin D goes a long way. Most people, I'm in Florida, I test vitamin D on a regular basis. I don't think, maybe once in the blue moon, I see a good vitamin D. most people, even here in Florida, who get sun all the time, have low vitamin D, right? So these are the kind of things we have to realize as we're aging, living on this planet with all the stresses of air pollution, water pollution, life itself, and as the cellular vitality of the system, it needs things, and we have to realize we have to support it. I think sometimes people think our body's invincible and it's just work like it's supposed to work, and they sometimes get surprised why it doesn't work as well as it needs to. So we got to support it. You can't have a garden just flourish on its own. You've got to tend to it. So I think that's the biggest message, is reduce those burdens.
Well, with our final last minutes on this call, do you have any other recommendations, any last words, anything else you'd like our community to walk away with?
Well, I guess if I had one last thing I would say is that I would want everyone to know that they're incredible. Their brain, their bodies, truly, we are incredible as a human being, as a species, that we have remarkable abilities. And there's so much more that we can do for ourselves and with ourselves and for our communities and, for the world overall. So I would just say to love yourself, anything that my own injuries have taught me is give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. Love yourself, give yourself grace, and give yourself the nourishments it needs, whatever that might be. So I'm a big fan of self-care. It may come in forms of nutrients. It may come in forms and tools like peptides or hormones, for example, but it might also come in other ways that we provide self-love and self-care. So I think that would be the final message, is to be empowered, but also to give ourselves grace and that we're powerful.